Rain hammers the blacktop like gunfire as a convoy tears through the industrial outskirts of Rome, engines screaming, headlights slicing through mist. Dominic Toretto grips the wheel of a matte black Charger, jaw set, eyes calm in the chaos. To him, speed isn't recklessness, it's control. Around him, his family moves like clockwork. Letty cutting through the traffic with surgical precision, Roman cracking jokes over comms to mask tension, Tej watching satellite feeds flicker with encrypted data. This isn't a street race. This is business. They slide beneath an abandoned rail terminal where floodlights buzz and flicker, illuminating steel crates stacked like coffins. The exchange is supposed to be clean. No names, no faces. Just engines idling and money changing hands. Dom steps out, boots splashing in shallow puddles, the smell of oil and ozone thick in the air. Somewhere above, thunder rolls. The syndicate's representatives arrive in silence, 3 black sedans, doors opening in unison. Men in tailored coats, eyes cold, movements economical. These aren't racers, they're accountants of violence. Dom clocks it instantly. He's dealt with cartels, mercenaries, agencies that don't exist. But something about these men feels quieter, deadlier. Crates are opened. Inside, unmarked weapons, custom-built, pristine, military-grade with no serials. The kind of hardware that disappears people. Tej's voice crackles in Dom's ear, uneasy. These specs don't belong to anyone we know. Before Dom can respond, one of the syndicate men stiffens, eyes shifting past Dom's shoulder. Fear flashes, fast, unguarded. The sound cuts through the rain, not thunder. A suppressed gunshot. One man drops, a neat hole blooming in his forehead, his body folding without drama. Panic detonates. Lights shatter, tires screech, another shot, then another, measured, unhurried. The remaining syndicate men scramble for cover, weapons coming up too late. From the shadows between crates, a figure moves with impossible efficiency. Black suit soaked by rain, hair slicked back, face unreadable. He fires twice. 2 more bodies hit the ground. Dom ducks behind the Charger, heart pounding, not from fear, but recognition. This isn't a hit gone wrong. This is a force of nature, colliding with the wrong place at the wrong time. Letty draws, scanning. Dom, we've got an unknown hostile. The figure reloads without looking, steps into the light. His eyes are flat, focused, like the world has narrowed to a single task. He glances at Dom's crew, not assessing them as threats, but as variables. He turns away, advancing toward the final syndicate survivor, who is crawling backwards, sobbing, pleading in a language Dom doesn't catch. Please, the man gasps, we paid. A single shot ends the sentence. Silence crashes down, broken only by rain and cooling engines. The man stands there, gun lowered, breathing steady. For a moment, Dom considers leaving. He's done worse calculations, but something in the man's posture, lonely, burdened, stops him. Hey, Dom calls out, voice calm but firm. You don't want trouble with us? The man turns, their eyes meet. It's like looking into a mirror that reflects a darker road. No words are exchanged, no threats, just an understanding. Both men live by codes forged in blood. Sirens wail in the distance. The man's gaze flicks upward, calculating exits. He moves fast. He vaults a barrier, disappears into the maze of steel and shadow. Roman exhales shakily. Please tell me that was not who I think it was. Tej pulls up a file, fingers flying, his face drains of color. I don't even have a file. That's the problem. One of the fallen syndicate men lies face up, eyes glassy. On his wrist, partially hidden beneath his cuff, is a tattoo. An arcane symbol Dom doesn't recognize, but something about it feels old, powerful. Letty crouches beside him. Dom, these guys weren't just criminals. Dom looks out into the rain-soaked darkness where the stranger vanished. Somewhere far away, a bell tolls. A church marking the hour. He feels it then, a shift, like crossing an invisible line. Yeah, Dom says quietly. And whoever that was, we weren't supposed to see him. As the sirens grow louder and the rain keeps falling, Dom knows one thing with absolute certainty. They didn't interrupt a deal. They walked into a war they didn't know existed, and into the world of a man who doesn't miss. The rain came down in needles, sharp and cold, tapping against black stone and polished marble. Neon from the city below bled upwards, staining the clouds pink and violet. But up here, high above the street, everything was muted, restrained, controlled. John Wick moved through it like a shadow that had learned how to breathe. He didn't rush. He never rushed anymore. The target stood alone on the terrace of a luxury hotel, back turned, phone pressed to his ear. A courier for the high table, mid-level, important enough to be protected, expendable enough to die quietly. Wick adjusted his grip on the pistol, the familiar weight settling into his palm like an old promise. One step forward, two. The rain masked his footsteps. Then the city screamed. An engine howled somewhere below, too loud, too raw, ripping through the night like it didn't care who heard. Headlights flared across the terrace as a sports car skidded into the valet zone far beneath. Tires burning rubber in a defiant arc. The courier turned, distracted, irritation flashing across his face. Wick froze. A second later, everything went wrong. The courier's phone crackled. Panic crept into his voice. He stepped back, straight into Wick's line of fire, and then ducked as gunshots erupted from the street level. Automatic fire, sloppy, amateur, not the table. Wick swore under his breath. He fired once. Clean. The courier dropped before he hit the marble, blood mixing with rain. Wick was already moving when alarms blared, red lights igniting across the building's perimeter. He vaulted the terrace railing, rolled across a service stairwell, and disappeared into the concrete veins of the hotel, just as explosions thundered below. By the time he reached the street, the chaos had spread like a wildfire. Cars blocked intersections at impossible angles. Smoke curled upward, thick and acrid. Men shouted in half a dozen languages, weapons raised, fingers twitchy. And at the center of it all, perfectly calm, perfectly defiant, stood Dominic Toretto. Wick saw him from across the street, broad shoulders, steady stance. A man who didn't flinch when the world tilted toward violence. Dom barked orders, his crew snapping into motion with military precision, disguised as street instinct. Engines revved, doors slammed. Someone shouted that the package was gone. So that was it. A covert syndicate masquerading as an international racing operation had hijacked a high-table transfer, and they'd done it loudly. Wick melted into the shadows of a shuttered storefront, watching, measuring. He counted exits, escape routes, angles of fire. Dom's people moved fast. Too fast for civilians. But they weren't assassins. They were something else. Family, Wick realized, watching the way they covered each other without being told. Sirens wailed in the distance. Dom turned, eyes scanning the street. For half a second, his gaze landed exactly where Wick stood. Not on Wick. No one ever truly saw him, but close enough that something tightened in Wick's chest. Recognition, maybe? Or instinct? Then Dom gave the order. The cars launched forward as one, engines screaming, taillights streaking red through the rain. The street was empty again, save for smoke, shell casings, and the bodies they hadn't bothered to clean up. Wick stepped out into the open. The high table would not like this. Hours later, the rain had stopped, but the tension hadn't. The briefing room beneath the Continental was carved from stone and silence. Wick stood at the center, coat drying, face unreadable. Across from him, the adjudicator's expression was carved from something harder than stone. "A transfer was compromised," she said. "A courier is dead, and the operation was exposed." Wick said nothing. A holographic display flared to life between them, images scrolling, traffic cams, satellite feeds, facial recognition overlays, fast cars, familiar faces. One image froze. A man standing in the rain, eyes hard, jaw set. "Dominic Toretto," the adjudicator said. "Known associates, international reach. Repeated interference in high-value criminal operations." The name hung in the air. Unpredictable, she continued, unaligned, and now aware. Wick studied the image. He thought of the way Dom had stood in the open, unafraid. The way his people had moved around him, not above, not below. Wick felt something stir, annoyance, yes, but also curiosity. Respect, maybe. Dangerous things. "They stole from us," the adjudicator said, and they drew attention. Her eyes met Wick's, cold, expectant. "Clean it up," she said. The screen shifted, highlighting routes, safe houses, patterns. At the center, Dom's face remained, marked now with a thin red ring. Wick nodded once. As he turned to leave, the image lingered behind him, glowing softly in the dark. The world had just expanded. Two violent systems drifting toward each other at speed. And somewhere deep down, John Wick knew this collision wouldn't end quietly. Headlights sliced through the fog like knives. The convoy tears down the coastal highway, engines screaming, tires gripping wet asphalt as the rain comes down hard and cold. 6 armored vans, no plates, military-grade suspension. Inside the lead vehicle, nervous men clutch rifles and keep their eyes forward. They don't know why the exchange had to be moved at the last minute, only that the buyer paid double to keep it silent. Above them, on a cliffside overlook swallowed by darkness, John Wick steadies his breathing. The wind tugs at his coat. Rain beads along the suppressor of his rifle. Through the scope, the world narrows to red taillights and the steady rhythm of speed. He has already measured distances, wind, escape routes, time to contact. This is not personal, it never is anymore. The lead van hits the kill zone. Wick fires and glass detonates inward. The driver jerks, blood misting the dashboard, and the van fishtails violently before slamming into the guardrail. Chaos erupts instantly. Brakes screech, doors fly open, men shouting in 3 languages. Wick is already moving. He descends the slope with controlled speed, boots sliding through wet rock and mud. 2 shots, a third, clean, efficient. The world makes sense when it's this simple. Then the night roars. A black Dodge Charger explodes out of the fog, headlights blazing, engine howling like a predator. It slams sideways into the second van, metal shrieking as the vehicle flips, skidding sparks across the road. Another car follows, blue Nissan, then a muscle car, then 2 more, weaving through gunfire like it's choreography. Wick pauses for half a second. That half second saves him. Automatic fire rips through the space where he would have been. He rolls, comes up behind a concrete barrier, eyes scanning. This wasn't supposed to be here. These aren't security reinforcements. These are drivers. Too aggressive, too precise. Dom Toretto grips the wheel, jaw clenched, eyes locked on the wreckage ahead. "This was supposed to be clean," Letty snaps over comms as bullets spark off her hood. "Plans change," Dom growls. "Get the package. Don't engage unless you have to." Too late. A man in a dark suit steps out of the smoke like the night itself gave him shape. He moves wrong, not panicked, not aggressive, controlled, purposeful. He fires twice, drops a gunman, reloads while walking forward, expression unreadable. Dom feels it in his gut. "That guy," he says quietly. He's not with them. Wick vaults the barrier, transitions to his pistol, and clears space with brutal precision. One man rushes him. Wick redirects the weapon, fires through the rib cage, pivots, drops another before the body hits the ground. An engine revs behind him. Wick turns just as the charger drifts sideways, stopping inches from him. The door swings open. Dom steps out. Rain streaks down his arms, his face hard, assessing. He takes in the bodies, the angles, the stillness of the man in front of him. "You want to tell me why you're turning this highway into a war zone?" Dom asks. Wick raises his gun, not at Dom, but low, controlled. "You shouldn't be here," Wick says. His voice is calm, flat, dangerous. "Funny," Dom replies. "I was about to say the same thing." Gunfire erupts again as surviving guards regroup. Letty rams one of the vans, sending weapons crates spilling across the road. Ted shouts coordinates. Roman yells something panicked and unhelpful. Wick and Dom move at the same time. Not together, but not against each other either. Wick drops, rolls under the charger. As bullets tear through the space above him, comes up firing. Dom grabs a fallen rifle, provides cover without comment. Their movements sync instinctively. Two professionals reading the same battlefield from different lives. It's over fast. Too fast. Bodies litter the road, engines hiss, rain washes blood into the gutters. Police sirens echo in the distance. Dom looks at the crates. Advanced weapons, too advanced. "This wasn't street level," he mutters. Wick holsters his gun. "You took something that doesn't belong to you," he says. Dom meets his gaze. "So did you." For a long moment they just look at each other. Not enemies, not allies. Two men carved by violence, recognizing the weight the other carries. Wick steps back into the shadows, already retreating. "If you're smart," he says, "you walk away." Dom doesn't answer. As Wick disappears into the rain, Dom feels it. The certainty that whatever line they cross tonight can't be uncrossed. And somewhere deep in the underworld, alarms begin to ring. The first body hits the floor before the alarm finishes screaming. John Wick moves through the safe house like a shadow sharpened into a blade. The room is bathed in cold industrial light, bare bulbs swinging from exposed wires, concrete walls sweating with condensation. Somewhere deeper inside, engines idle and men shout in Spanish and English, voices overlapping in confusion. They don't know why the deal collapsed. They only know someone is killing them. Wick doesn't waste time with questions. A guard turns the corner, rifle half raised. Wick fires once, clean. The man crumples, the sound swallowed by the thick concrete. Wick steps over the body, already reloading, eyes scanning, angles, reflections, exits. This place has been used before. Fast money, fast cars, fast exits. The kind of operation that doesn't expect a ghost to walk through the front door. He kicks open a steel door. Inside, three men freeze around a table covered in weapons crates, military-grade hardware, cereals shaved, destination unknown. One reaches for a pistol. Wick shoots him through the hand, then the head. Another dives behind the table. Wick vaults it, slams the man's skull into the concrete, fires twice into his chest. The last one runs. Bad choice. Wick chases him into a garage that smells of fuel and rubber. Sleek cars sit under tarps like sleeping animals. The man fumbles for keys. Wick fires through the windshield. Glass explodes outward. The man collapses across the hood, blood streaking the paint. Silence follows. Heavy. Final. Wick stands there for a moment, breathing steady, rain tapping against the corrugated metal roof. His suit is torn at the shoulder, darkened with blood that isn't all his. This wasn't supposed to be messy. Someone else interfered earlier, someone loud, reckless, and now the high table thinks this was his failure. He looks down at the dead man's phone, still vibrating on the hood. Wick answers it. "Where are you?" A voice snaps. Female, controlled, dangerous. Wick doesn't respond. He ends the call and drops the phone into a puddle of oil. Across the city, Dominic Toretto watches flames eat the remains of a warehouse they used 2 nights ago. Firefighters swarm the perimeter, red lights painting the wet asphalt. Dom stands apart from the chaos, arms crossed, jaw tight. Something about this doesn't sit right. "That wasn't a hit," Letty says quietly beside him. Her eyes track the smoke, alert. "That was an execution." Dom nods. He's already felt it, the precision, the way their roots were cut off before anyone could react. No warning, no negotiation, just death. "This wasn't Braga. Wasn't Cypher," Roman mutters, pacing. "Man, whoever this is, he's on another level." Tej's tablet glows in the dark. "I ran the footage from nearby traffic cams. He doesn't move like a soldier. He moves like he's already decided the outcome." Dom exhales through his nose. A slow burn starts in his chest. Not anger yet, instinct. "We didn't touch his people," he says. "Not like this." Letty looks at him, "But he thinks we did." As if summoned by the thought, Dom's phone vibrates. A single image loads. One of their stash locations, empty, cleaned out, every crate gone, every man dead. No message, no signature. Just a warning. Dom's grip tightens until the screen creaks. Night deepens, rain falls harder. Wick exits the safe house through the garage, stepping into the storm. Headlights flare to life as he drives away, engine low and controlled. He doesn't look back. He knows what this means. Lines have crossed. People will come, and they won't understand what they're stepping into. Dom stands alone now, the others hanging back, watching him. He's faced governments. He's faced gods with badges and billion-dollar arsenals. But this feels different, personal, quiet, deadly. "Dom," Tej says carefully, "we can move tonight, hit back before he hits us again." Dom doesn't answer right away. He stares at the rain, at the smoke thinning into the sky, at the empty space where certainty used to be. "No," he says finally. They all look at him. "We don't escalate this," Dom continues. "Not yet." Roman scoffs. "Man, he just wiped one of our houses like it was nothing." "That's exactly why," Dom says, his voice is low, absolute. "This isn't a war we understand. And until we do, nobody moves." Letty studies his face. She sees it now, not fear, respect. Dom turns to his family. "Stand down," he orders, "all of you." Thunder rolls overhead as the decision settles in, heavy, irreversible. Somewhere in the city, John Wick reloads his weapon in the dark, unaware that for the first time in years, someone has chosen not to come after him. Yet. Rain pounded the neon streets of Berlin, turning asphalt into a slick mirror that reflected every flickering sign, every flash of a passing car. Sirens wailed in the distance, but they were drowned out by the roar of engines and the metallic echo of gunfire. The air smelled of burnt rubber and ozone, punctuated by the faint copper tang of spilled blood. John Wick moved through it all like a shadow of inevitability, his coat soaked through, hair plastered to his skull, eyes scanning for threats invisible to anyone else. Every step was precise, measured, every heartbeat was a warning. The high table's emissary waited in the shadows of a crumbling, half-abandoned factory, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like dying insects. The man was tall, impeccably dressed, and cold as ice. He didn't move when Wick entered. He didn't need to. His presence carried the weight of countless contracts, countless deaths executed with brutal efficiency. He spoke with a clipped, controlled voice, each word dripping with authority. "John Wick," he said, "you have interfered in matters far beyond your immediate concern. The racers, you have exposed them. The high table does not forgive exposure. Wick's jaw tightened. He didn't flinch, didn't step closer or back. He had faced armies, assassins, monsters, but this was a different kind of reckoning. His hand brushed the handle of a gun beneath his coat, a subtle reminder to the emissary that violence was never far from his answer. "What do you want?" Wick asked, his voice calm, stripped of emotion but heavy with implied threat. "The racers, Dominic Toretto and his crew. They are your next assignment," the emissary said. "Eliminate them, or be excommunicated. You understand what that means?" Wick's eyes narrowed. The thought of losing everything, of being hunted by every contract killer under the high table's banner, pressed on him. But this Dom, this man, this family, didn't belong in Wick's world. And yet, in some perverse way, they had become intertwined with it. "I don't kill for them," Wick said softly, almost to himself, a shadow of hesitation flickering in his eyes. "I kill for necessity, and they're not the problem." The emissary's gaze was a blade. "Necessity is a luxury you cannot afford. Their existence threatens the balance. Your choice is clear." Outside, thunder rolled, as if the sky itself demanded an answer. Wick's mind raced, cataloguing every memory of his own losses, every moment of solitude broken by violence. He had been pushed before. He had survived the impossible. But this was a test of loyalty to something he had long thought he had abandoned. A code, a system, a life that demanded obedience or extinction. Meanwhile, across the city, Dom's crew was realizing the magnitude of what he had been unleashed. Letty's eyes scanned the streets from a dimly lit parking garage, the glow of their modified cars casting harsh shadows across her face. Roman cracked a joke, but it fell flat, the weight of unseen predators pressing down. Tej worked the scanner furiously, piecing together fragmented intel, every screen flashing with alerts of foreign operatives closing in. "They're coming," Tej said, voice taut. "Every channel we've ever used, every safe house we've had, compromised. These aren't normal hits, they're precision, they know us." Dom's hands gripped the wheel of a parked car as his mind raced. "Then we don't wait," he said, his tone low, almost a growl. "We hit them first." But even as they planned their counterstrike, a chill settled over the city, a sense of inevitability. Somewhere in the rain-soaked streets, Wick moved with the efficiency of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. His decision loomed over them all, a shadow stretching across every alley, every rooftop. Back in the factory, Wick's hand dropped to his side, brushing the familiar cold steel of a gun. His lips pressed into a thin line. He had a choice: eliminate Dom and his crew, or face the full wrath of the high table. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself a heartbeat of doubt, a glimpse of hesitation. But even doubt carried a promise: the world would never be the same after he made his decision. And then, as lightning split the sky, Wick's eyes locked on the emissary, his voice steady and quiet, the words slicing through the tension like a blade. "I'll handle it my way." The emissary's eyes flickered, recognition, anger, anticipation. Outside, the city trembled under the coming storm. Somewhere, Dom's crew was preparing for war they didn't yet fully understand, and Wick was standing at the edge of an irreversible choice, one that would ignite a collision between two unstoppable forces. In the shadows, the rain continued to fall, soaking everything in a cold, metallic sheen. Every drop was a warning, every heartbeat a countdown. And for the first time, John Wick allowed the faintest trace of a smile, because the game had truly begun. Rain streaked across the city like liquid silver, bouncing off the neon glow of the streets below. John Wick stood on the rooftop opposite the sprawling compound where Dominic Toretto's crew had holed up. He observed silently a ghost in black leather as cars with roaring engines darted between the shadows of shipping containers. This world was chaotic, loud, fast, unpredictable, but underneath it all, Wick saw something he hadn't encountered in years. Loyalty that wasn't purchased. Loyalty that ran deeper than money, contracts, or fear. Inside the compound, Dom's crew moved with fluid coordination. Letty checked the doors, eyes sharp, fingers tapping over locks and weapon grips. Roman argued with Tej about some new modification to a vehicle parked in the garage, but there was an unspoken thread of trust, holding the banter together. Each person had a role, a rhythm, a code. Wick watched and, against the grain of habit, felt a stirring of admiration. From across the rooftop, Wick's eyes followed Dom himself, leaning against the hood of a matte black Charger. He was surveying his family with a calm that belied tension coiling just beneath the surface. Dom's face bore the weight of responsibility, but there was a clarity, a certainty of purpose that Wick recognized instantly. He remembered that feeling, the rare balance of control in chaos, the rare weight of a code that defined a man beyond his fists or his aim. Wick descended the fire escape silently, landing on gravel that cracked under his boots. He approached the perimeter cautiously, assessing the compound not as a target, but as an ecosystem. Every movement of Dom's crew was deliberate, each choice layered with instinct honed over years of survival. Wick understood rule, strict, unforgiving rules, but these people lived by a code of their own making. He found it compelling. Inside, Dom noticed the subtle change in the air, and his senses were always tuned. Instincts built over countless near-deaths whispered that they were not alone. "Check the perimeter again," he said calmly to Letty, voice low but sharp. She frowned, but obeyed, moving toward the windows that overlooked the driveway. Roman laughed nervously, adjusting a tire iron, but Dom's gaze lingered on the shadows that was outside, where Wick lingered like a living shadow himself. "Whoever that is, he's careful," Dom muttered. There was no fear in his tone, only calculation. He knew the world operated in layers, and someone like Wick did not make mistakes lightly. Dom had faced enemies with firepower, chaos, and sheer malice, but this presence was different. Precise, patient, and lethal. Wick studied them further. The bonds between these people reminded him of something he had long lost. Loyalty untethered from obligation. Respect earned rather than extorted. He saw Roman's humor, Letty's discipline, Tage's ingenuity, all woven together like threads of steel. And at the center was Dom, the gravity keeping the chaos in orbit. Wick recognized the code even if he couldn't yet trust it. A sudden noise, subtle, almost imperceptible, snapped him back to the present. A drone hovered above, scanning, infrared glowing faintly through the rain-soaked night. Wick's eyes narrowed. The high table never left loose ends. They never allowed admiration or curiosity to linger. They were coming. Inside the compound, Dom's hand brushed the Charger's hood instinctively, feeling the vibrations of engines, the subtle hum of life around him. He knew the world outside was merciless. He knew every shadow could hide a knife, and yet even as he felt the shift in the atmosphere, the tension rolling like distant thunder, he didn't flinch. He looked out into the rain, at the shadow just beyond his fences, and met eyes with the man whose reputation could have terrified him. Instead, he saw respect in those eyes, even if it was unspoken, even if it was fleeting. Wick moved, fluid, controlled, every step measured. He would not strike indiscriminately. Dom's family was not his target. Not yet. But the high table was patient, and they never hesitated. Wick's mind raced through contingencies, entrances, exits, angles of attack. If they were coming, he would intercept them before Dom even saw the first flash of their guns. Lightning flashed across the horizon, illuminating the city in harsh white light. Dom's gaze swept the skyline, catching the same movement that Wick had already noticed. His jaw tightened, the silent understanding of a leader who had faced death countless times. He didn't know this man yet, but he recognized capability, precision, and a code that mirrored his own in ways he could respect. Then the first shots rang out, dull, calculated, not wild. Shadows fell over the compound as figures moved through the rain, weapons gleaming in intermittent flashes of lightning. Wick reacted instantly, body and mind synchronized, taking position to intercept. Dom barked orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. The dance had begun, and Wick was no longer an observer. As bullets splintered concrete and engines roared in protest, both men, one bound by a past of contracts and revenge, the other by family and faith, recognized an unspoken truth. Sometimes codes collide, but in that collision, a fragile alliance can be born. And then Wick's gaze locked on the lead assassin moving toward the main garage, a figure unmistakably sent by the high table, his lips pressed into a thin line. Dom's crew scrambled to defend their own, unaware that the world they knew was about to be reshaped forever. Wick moved first, and in that instant, a storm broke. Not of weather, but of violence, loyalty, and destiny. The night air was thick with the smell of gasoline and ozone. Rain lashed the rooftops of the safe house where Dom's family had taken refuge, each drop slicing through the dim yellow glow of floodlights. The city around them was silent, almost too quiet, as though the storm itself was holding its breath. Then came the first shattering crack, glass exploding like distant thunder, followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire tearing through walls. Dom vaulted over the kitchen counter, pulling Mia and Letty behind him as bullets ricocheted off metal and concrete. "Move!" he barked, voice sharp, controlled, carrying the weight of 1,000 nights surviving impossible odds. His eyes flicked to Roman, who was crouched near the shattered window, clutching his pistol as if it might magically make sense of the chaos. Outside, the rain masked the approach of dozens of assassins, their movements precise, silent, methodical. The high table had made good on its threat. They weren't just coming for Dom's crew, they were coming for all of them. A shadow detached itself from the darkness. Wick, the Baba Yaga himself, stepping through the open doorway like a spectre. He moved with a predator's fluidity, gun in one hand, knife in the other, his expression unreadable beneath the brim of his rain-darkened coat. In the dim light, his eyes were cold and calculating, scanning, weighing, deciding who lived and who didn't. "John," Dom began, but words caught in his throat as Wick leveled his sidearm at a figure emerging from the stairwell. The assassin didn't hesitate, charging forward with the precision of someone trained to kill without thought. Wick's finger tightened and the world seemed to slow. A single shot, clean, unerring, and the man crumpled silently. Blood pooled in the shallow puddles of water on the floor, black and slick against the fluorescent light. The assault escalated instantly. More figures poured in through every entrance. Wick moved like a force of nature, a storm wrapped in human form. He vaulted over furniture, rolling into hallways, dispatching one opponent after another with the terrifying efficiency of someone who had been engineered for death. Each movement was precise, almost balletic in its violence, yet ruthless. No hesitation, no mercy. Dom's crew fought alongside him, initially hesitant, unsure how to reconcile the man they'd just begun to trust with the nightmare everyone feared. Letty took down two attackers with her signature combination of martial skill and calculated aggression, while Roman fired wildly from cover, his bravado masking the gnawing fear. But every time an assassin fell, another seemed to take their place. They were facing not just trained killers, they were facing the wrath of the high table itself. Wick's movements began to draw the attention of the more skilled assassins, those sent to test him, perhaps even to lure Dom's crew into a trap. He didn't hesitate, pivoting mid-roll to fire, his weapons clicking in rhythm with the rain-slick chaos. One assassin tried to flank him through the shattered garage door, only to be met with a spinning roundhouse. His blade snapped and falling at his feet, a stifled groan, the only announcement of his demise. In a brief pause, Wick's eyes met Dom's across the room. There was a momentary recognition, a fleeting understanding that they were now bound by something far beyond family or loyalty. The world had shifted, and both men knew it. Trust wasn't given, it was enforced by necessity. "John, we don't have time," Dom shouted, diving as another volley of gunfire splintered the ceiling above. Wick didn't respond. He moved silently, inexorably, through the storm of violence, eliminating threats with surgical precision, each kill ringing out like a death sentence. And then, at the edge of the chaos, a figure attempted to escape, a high-table emissary whose face was familiar to Wick. Without hesitation, Wick brought him down. No warning, no negotiation. The die had been cast. When the last of the immediate threat fell, the room was silent except for the patter of rain and the labored breathing of those left standing. The walls were scarred, the floor slick with water and blood, and the air was heavy with smoke and adrenaline. Wick stood in the center, surveying the carnage with the calm detachment of a man who had made a choice, one that could never be undone. Dom approached cautiously, voice low. "John, what now?" Wick's gaze lifted, hard and unyielding, eyes glinting with quiet fury. "Now. They know there's no coming back," he said. "The high table will mark all of you. You're with me, whether you like it or not." Outside, the rain began to subside, leaving the city drenched and trembling. Somewhere in the distance, a single ominous signal flashed, a message from the table itself, excommunicado. The words hung in the night air, a death knell for those who had dared to defy the world's deadliest organization. Dom's crew looked at each other, realizing for the first time that nothing would ever be the same. The storm had passed, but the war was only beginning, and in the shadows, John Wick moved silently, already planning the next strike, the irreversible choice made, and the line between ally and predator forever blurred. The night air hung heavy with smoke and burnt rubber. Downtown Los Angeles shimmered under the sickly glow of neon signs and the flash of sirens. But it wasn't the cops that had Dom's crew on edge. The streets were crawling with shadows that moved too fast, silent yet deliberate, each one a whispered promise of death. Dom crouched behind the hood of a black Charger, his knuckles white against the steering wheel, eyes scanning every alley, every reflection in the rain-slicked asphalt. The sound of tires squealing, engines revving in the distance, was no longer music. It was a countdown. "They're coming," Letty said from the passenger seat, her voice low but tight, her eyes never leaving the street. She had the air of someone who had danced with death before, but even she looked unsettled tonight. Roman fidgeted in the back, muttering, "Who the hell even are these guys?" He had asked the question once already tonight, and the answer never came. It was worse than unknown. It was inevitable. Across the city, the faint hum of high-caliber weapons and suppressed engines was a symphony of dread. Wick had arrived days ago with a cold clarity that left no room for error. He moved like a storm contained in human form, precise and silent, leaving carnage in corridors Dom would have sworn were safe. By now the crew understood that this was not a vendetta that could be outrun. It could only be confronted. Dom pressed a finger to the radio. "All crews, listen up. Everyone who's still breathing, meet at the docks. We're going to need every set of hands." The decision felt heavier than any he'd made before. He wasn't just calling on friends. He was calling on family to enter a war that could tear them apart or end them. The streets erupted suddenly. A convoy of black SUVs materialized from side streets and underground parking ramps. Their tinted windows reflected the chaos outside, hiding lethal intent. Each vehicle carried assassins trained to kill efficiently, their movements choreographed to perfection. One shot, one mistake, and lives would be snuffed out like candles in a gusting wind. Dom's pulse accelerated. He recognized the signature, the precision of the high table's operatives. Wick emerged from the shadows, moving between cars like a phantom, guns gleaming in the stuttering neon light. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Dom felt the weight of every life Wick had taken, every calculated strike, as if it were a physical force pressing down on the city. And yet, there was a method to it, a discipline that even Dom could respect. The first collision was sudden. An SUV barreled towards Romar, who screamed and swerved, tires biting into the wet asphalt. Bullets shattered glass around him. Tej and Ramsey fired from another vehicle, the barrels of their rifles smoking, sending attackers spilling into the street. Letty slammed a car door, grabbing her pistols, eyes scanning for targets, muscles coiled like springs. Dom felt a hand on his shoulder. Wick's presence was both reassurance and warning. Without a word, Wick pointed down an alley, his eyes sharp. Dom understood. This war wasn't just the streets tonight. It was every corner, every shadow, every breath in the city. Hours bled into chaos. Explosions echoed as cars collided, flipped, and ignited. The once pristine highways were now a war zone, lined with twisted steel and shredded asphalt. Dom's crew moved like a single organism, each maneuver instinctual. Their lives tethered together by loyalty and trust that ran deeper than fear. But even their best efforts couldn't mask the truth. Every kill, every ambush, only sharpened the knives aimed at them. The high table had mobilized a network too vast to fully comprehend. Wick made that clear with each silent, deadly encounter. By the time they regrouped at the docks, the air was thick with smoke and the metallic tang of blood. Wick leaned against a shipping container, weapons still smoking, eyes scanning the horizon. Dom approached, chest heaving, sweat and rain mixing on his brow. "It's worse than I thought," Wick said, his voice calm but edged with an unspoken warning. "They're everywhere. This isn't just a hunt, it's a global dragnet. And now, you're on the list." Dom's hand clenched into a fist. "We've survived worse," he said, though even he felt the weight of the words, but deep down he knew the scale of the coming storm. The high table wasn't just hunting one man anymore, they were hunting both of them. And the bounty placed on their heads was unlike anything either of their worlds had ever seen. Wick straightened, eyes glinting. "You can't run. You can't hide. Only way forward is to fight. Together." Dom looked out over the water. The city's glow fractured by smoke and fire. Somewhere in the distance, the whine of engines, the snap of bullets, the hiss of explosives whispered that the world they knew had ended. And as the first notes of that new reality settled in, Dom made a decision that would bind their fates and set the streets ablaze. A single low hum vibrated in the docks, almost imperceptible. Then a voice crackled over a hidden transmitter, cold and mechanical. John Wick and Dominic Toretto wanted alive or dead. All assets converge. Dom's eyes narrowed. Wick's expression hardened. The war had just escalated. The city skyline was a fractured silhouette against the dim glow of early dawn, smoke curling from overturned vehicles and distant explosions painting the horizon in hellish orange. Dom stood atop a shipping container, the wind whipping his hair into his eyes, scanning the chaos that had become the streets he once called his own. Beside him, John Wick's presence was a silent storm, calm, precise, and terrifying. No words passed between them at first. Both men understood that survival now depended on coordination, not camaraderie. "They're reorganizing," Wick finally said, his voice low, measured like a blade sliding from its sheath. He nodded towards the east, where armored vans moved in tight formation along the freeway. "High-table assets are pulling back, but only to regroup. They'll strike harder, faster. We don't have the luxury of patience." Dom's jaw tightened. "Then we hit them first." His tone carried the weight of inevitability, a command that needed no debate. The crews were waiting below, engines humming, weapons loaded, eyes sharp. Roman cracked a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, sure. Let's go play whack-a-mole with assassins and see who's left standing." "Stay focused," Dom warned, slapping Roman's shoulder, though his touch barely concealed the tension in his own muscles. Letty slid up beside him, pistols glinting, calm, but ready to move at a moment's notice. "We're not just racing anymore," she said. "We're fighting for everything." Wick moved first, dropping from the container with feline grace, landing silently among the crew. He surveyed their vehicles, their arsenal, calculating trajectories and kill zones in an instant. For a fleeting moment his eyes met Dom's. There was no trust, only acknowledgement. Two men, both driven by loss and duty, now bound together by necessity. The convoy of armored vans roared forward, engines snarling, headlights cutting through the haze. Dom and Wick split the team, Tage and Ramsey on drones, hacking communications and triggering remote traps. Roman and Brian handling diversionary assaults. Letty and Mia coordinating flanking maneuvers. Dom and Wick at the forefront, the lethal duo driving toward the first outpost. Bullets rained across the freeway as Wick's handgun barked in short, disciplined bursts, each shot precise, each kill methodical. He moved like water through fire, neutralizing threats without hesitation, leaving Dom space to unleash controlled chaos behind the wheel of his Charger. Tires screamed against asphalt, engines roaring as he rammed SUVs into crates and barriers, creating maelstroms of debris and distraction. The first outpost, a warehouse stocked with high-table operatives, exploded under a synchronized assault. Explosions illuminated the interior, revealing figures trained to kill with inhuman precision. Wick's knives flashed, slicing tendons, disarming, neutralizing threats before they could react. Dom vaulted from car to car, rifle in hand, firing with impeccable timing, clearing hallways with brutal efficiency. Even in the heat of battle, moments of clarity punctuated the violence. Dom caught Letty's gaze across the warehouse, the shared unspoken understanding of risk and sacrifice. Roman shouted over the chaos, a mix of fear and exhilaration. "This is insane!" Wick's voice cut through, cold and unflinching. "Focus! No mistakes!" By mid-morning, the first wave was annihilated, but the cost was evident: wrecked vehicles, scorched walls, injured allies. Each explosion, each shot fired, had sent ripples through the underworld, messages etched in fire. The high table would respond, and they would respond with something worse. Wick's expression darkened, a shadow crossing the usual calm of his face. He scanned the streets, instinct screaming. "They're sending someone," Wick muttered. His tone was not warning, it was statement. "Someone I've faced before, someone you won't recognize until it's too late." Dom's eyes narrowed. "Then we prepare. All of us." He glanced at his crew, reading the resolve, the exhaustion, the unshakable loyalty. No turning back. Wick nodded, his hand brushing the grip of a secondary pistol. "No alliances," he said quietly, almost to himself. "No compromises. Only survival. Only the mission." In the distance, a black helicopter sliced through the smoke-filled sky, its silhouette cutting a menacing arc above the ruined cityscape. Dom instinctively tightened his grip on the wheel. Wick's eyes followed the shadow, calm but alert. Both men understood that this was not just another attack. This was a signal. The High Table had unleashed one of their deadliest operatives, a hunter even Wick feared, and the real war was about to begin. Dom inhaled, the acrid scent of smoke and gasoline filling his lungs. He glanced at Wick, the man he could neither trust nor fully understand. "We do this together," he said, voice steady, carrying the weight of irrevocable choice. Wick's eyes, sharp and calculating, met Dom's. For the first time there was a flicker of acknowledgement, of mutual necessity. "Together," he repeated. The rumble of engines, the distant gunfire, the shadow overhead, they were all a warning. The High Table had escalated, and there would be no safe ground left. The streets, the city, the world, they were all now part of a battlefield neither man could walk away from. And in that realization, a single truth crystallized. The alliance had been forged in fire, and no one who entered it would survive unchanged. The rain was relentless, drumming against the corrugated metal of the abandoned warehouse district, turning streets into reflective rivers of neon and decay. Dom's crew had been stretched thin for days, repairing cars, patching wounds, and planning strikes, but tonight a new threat arrived, one that changed everything. Wick sensed it before anyone else, a presence that moved not with the chaos of the city but through it, precise, silent, predatory. Dom's hand tightened around the steering wheel of his Charger as he pulled up alongside Letty. "Something's off," he muttered, eyes scanning the alleys for even a hint of movement. Letty's jaw set. "You think it's the High Table?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The air was charged with electricity, not just from the storm, but from the creeping realization that this wasn't just another assassin squad. They were being hunted differently. A black sedan slid into the street ahead, its headlights cutting through the torrential downpour. The car moved like it was alive, fluid and deliberate. From inside, the driver's silhouette was obscured, but the aura of lethal intent radiated outward, then without warning a precision strike. A grenade launched from the roof of the nearest warehouse, shattering the Charger's windshield. Dom swerved violently, barely avoiding a collision with a pile of twisted metal and burning debris. "Move!" Wick barked, appearing beside them as if conjured from the storm. His pistols flashed in the neon light, bullets cracking through the rain-slicked steel, striking the assailants with exacting efficiency. Dom's crew instinctively fell into formation, their weapons answering with synchronized bursts, but even their combined firepower couldn't mask the truth. This was no ordinary hunt. Whoever they were facing had anticipated every conventional tactic. From the shadows, the enforcer emerged, tall, impeccably dressed, movements fluid like a predator that had studied every beat of Wick's style. Every shot Wick had ever fired, every tactic he had perfected over decades, seemed accounted for. The man moved with an almost supernatural calm, methodical and terrifying. One by one, Dom's extended allies began to fall, targets picked off before they could react, each death punctuated by the cruel precision of a hand trained to erase legends. Roman screamed as a shot struck close to his head, the asphalt erupting in sparks where the bullet had ricocheted. Tej and Ramsey dove behind a crushed van, frantically returning fire, but the enforcer wasn't interested in them. Not yet. His gaze was locked on Wick, every motion a message. The hunter will be hunted, and nothing else matters. Wick's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. For the first time in years, he hesitated, not in fear, but in calculation. This was no ordinary kill order. This was personal. The High Table had engineered a predator, designed to exploit his every weakness, anticipate his every move. The realization hit like a thunderclap. They weren't trying to defeat him. They were trying to erase him completely. Dom's voice broke through the tension, firm and resolute. "Wick, we can't hold them off forever. We need a plan, now." But even Dom, who had faced armies and empires, felt the gravity of the moment pressing against him. Around them, the warehouse district was collapsing under fire, explosions sending shards of concrete and steel into the storm-slicked night. The storm mirrored the chaos, a symphony of wind, water, and destruction. Wick moved with lethal grace, clearing a path through the attackers with precision strikes, his face a mask of focus. Letty and Dom provided cover, guiding the survivors to relative safety, but every step forward revealed more of the enforcer's plan. Allies they had counted on, mercenaries, informants, even long-time street racers, were systematically dismantled. One by one, Dom watched the people who had built this fragile alliance fall, the consequences permanent and unyielding. The enforcer finally emerged fully from the shadows, stepping across the wreckage as if he were walking through a quiet park, his presence alone turning the chaos into something almost ceremonial. Wick raised his weapons, sweat and rain mixing on his brow, and for a moment time seemed to slow. The two men studied each other, mirror images of determination, skill, and unflinching resolve. "You've made a mistake coming here," the enforcer said, his voice low but cutting through the storm like a blade. "This isn't about winning. It's about ensuring you never rise again." Wick's eyes hardened. "I've never been erased before." His fingers tightened on the triggers, each movement deliberate, calculated. He knew the rules of the High Table were absolute, but this was different. This was beyond rules. This was survival against a system that wanted him gone without a trace. Dom placed a hand on Wick's shoulder. "Whatever it takes, we fight. Together." But even as he spoke, a gnawing sense of dread settled over them both. The enforcer smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly, then vanished into the shadows as quickly as he had appeared, leaving only the distant echoes of destruction and a stark and terrifying truth. The High Table wasn't just challenging Wick. They were rewriting the endgame entirely. And as the storm raged on, Wick knew the war had just turned personal in a way that could never be undone. Rain pounded the rooftops of Los Angeles like a drumbeat of impending doom. Water ran in rivulets across the cracked pavement, carrying oil and shattered glass from the last skirmish. Dom sat in his Charger, headlights cutting through the mist, gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles ached. Around him, his family moved like shadows across the deserted streets. Letty checking rooftops, Roman nervously adjusting his guns, Tej scanning alleyways with trembling precision. Exhaustion had begun to show on their faces. The long nights of firefights and high-speed chases, leaving scars deeper than any wound could. Dom's eyes flicked toward the horizon to where the orange glow of fires burned in the distance. It was a city caught between survival and annihilation. Every corner of LA seemed alive with danger, and every car engine that broke the silence made him flinch. They were hunted now, not just by the high table, but by the echo of the lives Wick had once taken, reverberating across a network that would not forgive intrusion. Wick moved silently beside Dom, jacket dripping, weapons slung but ready. He glanced at the crew with the faintest flicker of remorse. "I can't make this right," he muttered under his breath, voice almost lost in the roar of the rain. "But I won't let it get worse than it already is." Dom's gaze hardened. "We don't have the luxury of right or wrong, John. We only have survival." The tension between them was thick, almost visible in the cold rain. Wick's guilt was heavy. He had pulled Dom and his crew into a war they had no choice to fight. Dom's family, the people he had spent a lifetime protecting, were now exposed to horrors they'd never imagined. And it showed. Letty hesitated before stepping onto the roof of a building to scan the street below, her jaw tight. Roman's hands shook as he loaded his pistol again, muttering, "I thought we were done. Thought this was over." A sudden flare of headlights cut through the darkness and Dom cursed. 3 SUVs barreled down a narrow street, precision-engineered, their occupants trained to kill with mechanical efficiency. Dom's crew dove into action, Letty firing from a rooftop, Tej taking cover behind a concrete barrier, Roman weaving between explosions. But exhaustion slowed their reflexes. Wick moved like a shadow of death. 2 assailants dropped silently before they could react, the echo of suppressed gunfire mingling with the staccato rhythm of the rain. He didn't pause. He didn't hesitate. And yet every precise kill left a weight on his shoulders, a reminder that every life taken to protect Dom's family came at the cost of his own conscience. Dom ducked behind the hood of his Charger, feeling the weight of leadership like never before. He watched as Wick cleared the last of the SUVs, his movements flawless, almost brutal in their efficiency. And then he saw it. Roman frozen, staring at the body of one assailant, face pale, hands trembling. I can't do this anymore," he whispered. Dom reached a hand to his shoulder, but Roman recoiled slightly, his fear raw and unmasked. Letty approached Dom, eyes wide and searching. "Dom, we can't keep going like this. The family, it's fracturing. We're losing each other." Dom exhaled sharply, looking out over the rain-slicked streets. He knew she was right. The weight of the battles, the constant threat, the fear. It was eating them alive. And yet there was only one choice that could possibly hold the pieces together. One man who could bridge the gap between the chaos of the high table and the survival of his family. He turned to Wick, rain dripping from his brow, eyes hard but resolute. "I don't know if I can trust anyone else to do this. But you stay with us. You lead where I can't." Wick's lips pressed into a thin line, the faintest flicker of surprise crossing his face. "You're putting everything on the line," he said, voice low. "Everyone you care about." Dom cut him off, voice steady, unwavering. "I have no choice. We're all in this. Together." For a brief moment, the rain and gunfire seemed to still. The decision hung in the air, fragile and dangerous, yet undeniable. Dom had put his faith in a man whose life had already cost more than anyone should endure, and in doing so, he'd risked everything. Not just his crew, but his family, the city, and perhaps even himself. Lightning split the sky overhead, illuminating the distant silhouettes of new threats advancing through the mist. Wick's eyes narrowed, the weight of the coming battle settling in. The crew, though battered and fearful, felt a flicker of resolve ignite. Dom had made his choice. Now the question was whether the world or the high table would allow them to survive it. And somewhere in the shadows, a whisper of movement promised that nothing would ever be the same again. Rain hammered the abandoned shipping yard like a relentless drum, bouncing off steel containers and pooling in grimy puddles along the cracked asphalt. The night was nearly black, the city lights swallowed by the downpour, and the occasional flash of lightning revealed the skeletal outlines of rusted cranes, their arms like watchful predators above them. Dom's crew huddled beneath a tarpaulin, engines idling, faces tight with tension. Tonight wasn't about speed or showmanship. Tonight it was about survival and revenge. Wick emerged from the shadows, coat dripping, boots silent against the wet concrete. He moved like a predator, assessing the terrain, eyes scanning, calculating. Dom noticed the faint line of exhaustion under his sharp features, the way his hands flexed around the guns he carried as extensions of himself. He said nothing. Words weren't necessary. Dom had seen death walk before, but Wick carried it differently. Cool, precise, inevitable. "We've mapped their network," Tej said, spreading holographic schematics across a tablet. Neon reflections danced across his face, eyes wide with urgency. Finance hubs, command nodes, communications centers. It's all centralized in one location. If we hit it, we cripple the table's reach for months, maybe years. Dom's gaze hardened. He had been in wars before, fought men who didn't blink at blood, but this was different. "That place," he said slowly, voice rough. "They don't just protect it. They kill anyone who gets close. That's suicide." Wick's expression remained impassive, but Dom saw the edge of resolve sharpening in his eyes. "I know," he said quietly, "which is why I'll go first." Silence fell. The rain seemed louder than ever, each drop a drumbeat in the still night. Letty stepped forward, hand brushing Dom's shoulder. "You can't do that alone," she said, voice taut, fear threading through this calm. "It's not just your war, John. It's ours now." Wick met her gaze, calm, unflinching. "If we go in together, more of you die. If I go alone, there's a chance the rest of you survive. You've taught me what family means. I won't take that from you." Dom clenched his jaw, watching the subtle tension in Wick's stance. The slight lean, the way he flexed his fingers, the faint twitch of his lips that only a man who had lost everything could show. He swallowed the lump rising in his throat. "You don't have to do this," he said, though part of him already knew it wasn't a choice. Wick's eyes flicked to the schematics, and then back at Dom. "It's not just about the high table," he said softly. "It's personal. I can't walk away, not again." The plan formed like clockwork in the air between them. Tej's fingers danced over the tablet, simulating entry points, guard rotations, surveillance blind spots. Ramsey outlined electronic countermeasures, the drone feeds, encrypted communications. Every inch of the building, every floor, every guard, every corridor was mapped. But mapping didn't make it safer. Every path was a razor's edge, one slip, one miscalculation. And death would claim him before he could even reach the heart of the high table. Dom placed a hand on Wick's shoulder, the rain sliding down his arm like cold fire. "You're not walking in alone," he said, though his words were half promise, half warning. "We'll support you, but you take the lead, always do." Wick nodded once, a small, almost imperceptible motion. There was no hesitation in his eyes, no second thought. Just that quiet, deadly resolve that had haunted entire criminal networks for decades. "Then it begins tonight," he said. The crew prepared, each member checking weapons, armor, and vehicles. Engines purred under the relentless rain, tires hissing against the wet concrete. Dom's hand hovered over the steering wheel of the Charger, fingers twitching. This was no ordinary race, no street-level brawl. This was war in miniature. Every movement choreographed. Every second a decision between life and death. As Wick stepped into the rain, silhouetted against the flickering lights of the yard, Dom's chest tightened. He could see the weight of the task ahead, etched into Wick's shoulders, the tension in his gait. Yet there was no fear, only focus. A man willing to step into hell so that others might live. A distant thunderclap shook the containers and Wick glanced back. No turning back, he said, voice low but carrying. Everything we have, everything we've built, depends on this. If I don't come back, finish what we started. Dom swallowed hard, eyes locked on the man who had become both an enigma and a reckoning. Wick disappeared into the shadows between the cranes, rain soaking him to the bone, moving like a shadow through the storm. The docks fell silent for a moment. The only sound, the hammering rain and the distant echo of engines. Then Tage muttered almost to himself, God help them. Dom's fist tightened on the wheel. We don't get help. We get results. And as the first echoes of distant gunfire reached the yard, it was clear. The war for the high table's heart had begun. The rain fell in jagged sheets, hammering the cracked concrete of the abandoned high table stronghold. Lightning cut across the night sky, illuminating the jagged ruins of a city once teeming with power, now hollowed by shadows and smoke. Dom's crew moved like phantoms through the wreckage, tires skidding across puddles, boots splashing in water stained dark with oil and blood. Every corner held danger. Every echo could mean death. John Wick was ahead, fluid and unstoppable, weaving between the skeletal remains of crumbling walls. His guns were extensions of his body, each shot measured, each movement precise. But tonight, precision was a luxury he couldn't afford. The high table had anticipated them, reconfigured defenses, automated turrets hidden behind broken walls, snipers perched in ruined balconies. Every step Wick took felt like threading a needle through a battlefield rigged to explode. Dom, flank left, Wick ordered sharply, one eye on the chaos ahead. His voice was low but commanding, the calm of a man who had stared into death so many times it no longer surprised him. Dom obeyed instinctively, letting Letty and Roman follow him down a corridor lined with overturned crates and shattered electronics. Sparks from broken wiring danced across the wet floor, momentarily illuminating Roman's wide-eyed panic. "They've got us boxed in," Roman shouted, glancing at the automated gun turrets, rotating slowly, scanning for movement. "Stay calm," Dom said, his voice steady despite the tension, the weight of leadership pressing down on him like a physical force. "We've survived worse. Focus." Wick fired again, dropping a pair of guards with brutal efficiency, but then a flash of movement caught him off guard. A hidden assailant, silent as smoke, lunged from the shadows. He managed to parry, but the attack left him exposed for a heartbeat too long. A bullet tore through his side, tearing muscle and dropping him to a knee. Pain flared, hot and immediate, but he didn't cry out. Instead, he gritted his teeth, dragging himself behind cover while crimson stained his coat. "John!" Dom's shout cut through the storm, sharp and urgent. He skidded forward, Letty close behind, guns raised, eyes scanning the darkness for the unseen enemy. Wick's hand shook as he reloaded, every movement slower than usual, every breath a labor. His face, usually impassive and cold, betrayed the first crack of vulnerability Dom had ever seen. "Keep moving. Cover me," he rasped, jaw tight. Even in pain, he radiated lethal focus, but it was clear this time the hunter had become the hunted. The corridors twisted, smoke curling from short-circuited electronics, creating a haze that made it impossible to see more than a few feet. Explosions rattled the building as Roman accidentally triggered a pressure plate, sending Dom diving to shield him from debris. Letty rolled, landing in a crouch beside Dom, scanning for the sniper that had somehow remained unseen amidst the chaos. Through the haze, Wick's form rose, leaning on the wall for support. His coat was shredded, his weapon slick with rain and blood, and his face was a mask of grim determination. "Go, finish the plan," he whispered, voice ragged, eyes meeting Dom's. "I'll cover, as long as I can." Dom's chest tightened, rage and fear coiling in his gut. He had led crews through impossible odds, but this, seeing the man he had learned to respect, perhaps even trust, bleed in front of him, felt like staring at the edge of a cliff without a rope. "No," Dom growled. "We finish this together. Don't you dare." But Wick had already slipped away, dragging himself toward the heart of the stronghold. Every step left a crimson smear across the wet concrete. Dom's crew followed, hearts pounding, weapons ready. But the realization had sunk in. Tonight, Wick was no longer invincible. The legend was human, and human things could die. The final confrontation erupted in a vaulted chamber, flickering with emergency lights and fire from ruptured fuel lines. Automated defenses roared to life, and the high table's enforcers advanced with cold precision. Wick, moving on sheer willpower, cut through the first wave, but with each fallen enemy his strength waned, his movements slower, deliberate, but growing ragged. Dom watched in horror as Wick was struck again, staggering, a sharp intake of breath cutting through the rain and gunfire. He collapsed behind a pillar, body shaking, the first sign of real weakness the underworld had ever seen. Letty pressed a hand to Dom's shoulder, silent, eyes wide, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. Outside, the storm continued to batter the city. Lightning revealed the shattered skyline, a grim reflection of the chaos inside, and as news silently began to spread through the underground networks, whispered in awe and terror, one thought crystallized. John Wick might be dead. Dom's jaw clenched, his eyes scanning the ruined chamber, hardened with resolve. He had never led without Wick before. Tonight, he would have to. The world outside waited, dangerous and unrelenting, and the underworld would soon know. There was a war coming, and for the first time, legends could bleed. Rain pounded against the corrugated metal roofs of the abandoned warehouse district, each drop like a drumbeat counting down a war that Dom's crew was losing. Fires from overturned vehicles reflected in puddles on the cracked asphalt, throwing flickering shadows over walls tagged with the ghosts of a city at war. The streets were silent now, but that silence wasn't peace. It was anticipation. Every shadow seemed to twitch. Every echo of distant gunfire, a warning. Dom crouched behind the charred remains of a shipping container, fingers tight on his pistol, eyes sweeping the horizon. Letty was next to him, muscles coiled, gun raised, scanning every alley and rooftop. They had fought tooth and nail through this city, through Europe, even across the deserts of North Africa, but now they were stretched thin. Too many fronts. Too few allies, the weight of every fallen friend pressed down on him like a leaden shroud. "Where is he?" Roman's voice cracked from the passenger seat of a battered SUV, eyes wide as he scanned the skyline. "I mean, John. Wick." He swallowed hard, his bravado evaporating in the cold, damp night. He had asked the question before, and every time it went unanswered, the fear in the pit of his stomach deepened. Tage tapped furiously on a cracked laptop perched on the hood of the car. "Tracking's gone dark everywhere he was last seen," he muttered, voice tight. Nothing. It's like he vanished off the grid. He glanced up at Dom, eyes filled with worry. Dom. He was the one holding them off without him. His words hung, unfinished, heavy with the truth no one wanted to say aloud. The first strike came without warning. A convoy of black SUVs roared over the bridge, engines growling like beasts. Roof-mounted turrets opened fire, sending metal shredding into the empty streets. Dom and Letty dove for cover as bullets ricocheted off steel, sparks flying in every direction. Roman screamed as a car exploded nearby, the heat washing over him in a wave that singed his hair. The high table's operatives had sensed weakness, and they were moving in with lethal precision. Dom's chest heaved as he fired, each shot deliberate, calculated, his movements precise but slower, heavier, weighed down by absence. He was a man used to relying on his crew, but tonight even that wasn't enough. The high table had exploited the void left by Wick, and now their entire world was collapsing in slow motion. Letty's eyes flicked to him, fierce, unyielding. "We can't hold them," she whispered, voice taut, each word slicing through the rain. "We're spread too thin." Her hand trembled slightly on her weapon, a rare crack in her armor. Dom met her gaze, jaw tight, forcing resolve over panic. "Then we hit them where it hurts," he said, low and dangerous. "We do what we always do, we fight. But we can't do it alone." Explosions lit the skyline behind them as the convoy pushed further into the city. Shadows moved along walls, flickers of movement that were too deliberate to be human, or at least not human in the ordinary sense. Dom's mind raced. Every calculated strike, every strategic kill he and his crew had accomplished over the past months had depended on Wick's precision and unpredictability. Without him, they were reacting, not controlling. Every alleyway, every intersection had become a death trap. Roman's voice broke over the comms. "Guys, I don't know how much longer we can keep this up. They're everywhere." Panic had crept in, clawing at the edges of his usual sarcasm. He hadn't cried before, not ever, but tonight the weight of the reality was crushing him. Then it happened. From the darkness of a rain-drenched alley, a figure emerged. His coat was soaked, clinging to his body, but his presence was unmistakable. Calm, deadly. Every step deliberate, silent, over the debris-strewn pavement. Dom froze. Letty froze. Roman choked back a breath. Even Tedge's fingers stopped mid-tap. Wick's eyes glimmered under the neon reflections, colder now, sharper. There was no warmth, no reassurance, just focus, precision. A man remade by absence, by survival, by the loss of what he once held close. Every assassin in the area seemed to hesitate, sensing the predator in their midst, as if the night itself bent around him. Dom's hand tightened on his pistol, recognizing the unmistakable rhythm of a man who had returned changed, no longer merely a weapon, but an avalanche waiting to be unleashed. "He's back," Letty breathed, awe and fear threading her words. Wick stopped at the edge of the alley, his gaze sweeping the battlefield. Without a word, he raised a single finger, pointing toward the chaos, a silent declaration that the war was far from over. In that instant, Dom knew their fragile hope, their battered fight, was about to ignite once more. But Wick's return came at a cost. They were no longer the same. Nothing would ever be the same again. The rain intensified, masking the distant growl of engines, the whisper of shadows closing in. Wick moved forward, and the city seemed to hold its breath. The city was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, almost reverent, as if the darkness itself was holding its breath. Rain-slicked streets reflected fractured neon, turning every puddle into a mirror of the world upside down. Broken glass littered the alleys where shadows moved too fast to follow, and the faint metallic tang of blood lingered in the air. Wick emerged from the mist like a phantom, his coat plastered to his lean frame, weapons already drawn, his eyes cold as steel. Nothing in the world mattered anymore, only the hunt, only the inevitable reckoning. A low rumble in the distance warned him that this wouldn't be quiet for long. Engines roared and tires screamed as a convoy of black SUVs cut through the city, the high table's elite enforcers moving with surgical precision. They had believed his disappearance meant weakness, absence, surrender. They had underestimated the wrath of a man who had already lost everything. Wick's movements were fluid, almost preternatural. He flowed from shadow to shadow, gunfire snapping like thunder around him, each shot finding its mark before any enemy had a chance to blink. Bodies crumpled silently, cars crashed and exploded behind him, flames licking the wet asphalt as if the city itself were burning in his wake. He didn't speak. He didn't hesitate. Each step, each pull of the trigger carried the weight of a score settled long ago and a warning that nothing would stand in his way. From a rooftop above, Dom watched with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Wick had returned, but not as the man who once operated by codes, by rules. This was something else, something primal. He moved like a force of nature, eyes locked on every target, calculating every angle, and yet there was no restraint. Dom's jaw tightened as he followed the cascade of destruction. He's not human anymore, he muttered, barely audible over the chaos. In a narrow alley, two high-table assassins had cornered him. They were faster, better equipped, but Wick's hands were faster still, a flash of steel, a shot from a silenced pistol, and then another. Bodies dropped with a finality that left no time for screams. He tore through their formation like a hurricane, leaving nothing but smoke and the smell of gunpowder. Even the city seemed to recoil, shaking from the sheer force of his presence. Wick's gaze flicked to a distant skyscraper where the remaining enforcers had regrouped. They were organizing, calculating, trying to contain a man who had already proven uncontrollable. He stepped into the open street, rain pounding down, and the world narrowed to the enemies before him. Every gun aimed, every weapon raised, every life drawn against him became a single, unified target. He didn't flinch. He didn't think. He struck. Explosions lit the skyline, and Dom could feel the tremors through his boots. From below he saw the wreckage of what had once been safe streets, now transformed into a war zone, carved by one man's unrelenting fury. And then a silence fell, a pause in the storm, just long enough for Wick to tilt his head, sensing movement behind him. He spun, twin pistols spitting fire in perfect rhythm, each shot a punctuation mark of devastation. In the heart of the city, the high table's command hub had gone dark. Their communications, once buzzing with orders and precision, now choked on static. The message came through finally, clipped and cold. John Wick, Baba Yaga, total eradication. All units deploy lethal force. Nothing survives. Dom's hand tightened on his car keys. He knew the decree wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration. The entire underworld, every syndicate, every assassin network had been ordered to converge on Wick. Every corner of the globe that had once been safe was now a battlefield. And yet he moved without fear, without hesitation. Wick lowered his weapons for a fraction of a second and let the rain hit his face, letting it wash away the last remnants of restraint, of mercy. There was nothing left to bargain for, no lives to save beyond the ones already claimed. His resolve was absolute, and the world would feel it. Dom's eyes met his across the city, recognition and dread reflected in their depths. Wick wasn't returning to protect, to negotiate, or to hide. He was returning to end, and the consequences would ripple through every criminal network, through every city, through every life touched by those who thought they could control him. A distant explosion sent shards of glass into the sky. Wick turned toward the sound, expression unreadable but unrelenting. The streets trembled underfoot, the rain pelted harder, and the world seemed to contract around him. He raised his guns once more, and in that moment it was clear. Nothing would survive his path, and the high table had unleashed their judgment. Too late. The sun had long since vanished behind a choking haze of smoke and fire. Across every continent, cities burned with the chaotic symphony of war, skyscrapers fractured by explosions, streets carved into trenches by tire treads and bullet casings, neon signs flickering like ding hearts. Dom's crew moved through the wreckage with precision, but the sheer scale of the assault left every step weighted with dread. The world they had once known, the streets of LA, the tunnels of Rio, the night roads of Tokyo, had all become battlefields, and the boundaries between civilization and underworld were gone. In a shattered alley in Berlin, Dom ducked behind a steel dumpster, chest heaving, sweat streaking through soot on his face. Letty pressed close, her eyes scanning the horizon, every muscle taut, ready to spring. Around them, mercenaries and assassins fought in a terrifying blur, shards of glass and sparks flying as guns and knives met. Dom's ears rang with the roar of engines and the crackle of gunfire, and for a brief, sickening moment he realized they were everywhere. Not just hunters, but predators trained to hunt as a coordinated network. Wick had warned him, but seeing it firsthand was different. "Dom, over here!" Roman's voice cracked through the chaos, carrying panic over the cacophony. He was pinned between two armored vehicles, bullets kicking up shards of pavement around him. With a roar, Dom tore across the debris-strewn street, smashing into one of the SUVs with the charger, tires screeching against the cracked asphalt. The impact spun the vehicle, sending attackers sprawling, and Dom leapt from the hood, pistols drawn. Every shot told a story: precision, discipline, inevitability. Wick moved beside him now, a ghost among explosions, carving a path through the assassin ranks. His calm was frightening, almost unnatural, as he dropped enemies with one fluid motion after another. Dom glanced at him, a flicker of awe passing over his grimace. Even here, in the heart of global collapse, Wick was a singular force of reckoning. But there was no time for admiration. On the opposite side of the street, a convoy of mercenary trucks barreled forward, headlights cutting through the smoky haze. Tej and Ramsey, commandeering an armored van, opened fire from the rear, sending sparks and debris into the night. Bullets ricocheted, one finding the engine of a pursuing vehicle and igniting it in a flash that illuminated the street like daylight. A cascade of chaos followed. Cars overturned, walls crumbled, and the sound of metal on metal rang like a funeral bell. Dom shouted over the storm of destruction. "Everyone, keep moving! Stick to the plan! We make it to the rendezvous!" But even as he barked the words, he knew the plan was fragile. Each city, each street, each alley was now a battlefield in a war they hadn't asked for but could no longer escape. Assassins poured in from rooftops, emerging from shadows with lethal grace. Knives flashing, bullets carving through the night. The world was collapsing around them, and every step forward was paid for in blood. Amid the carnage, Dom caught sight of a child trapped under a toppled motorcycle. Without hesitation, he tore across the debris, scooping the trembling child into his arms, even as a hail of bullets ricocheted past him. Letty followed, clearing the path with twin pistols, and together they reached the safety of a derelict building, the smell of smoke and gunpowder suffocating. Roman and Tej regrouped with Ramsey, their faces pale but determined, a mix of fear and adrenaline sharpening their movements. From above, drones buzzed like hornets, tracking every motion, broadcasting coordinates to unseen hunters. The war was no longer just in the streets. It was in the skies, in the shadows, in the very heartbeat of the cities themselves. Every alleyway could be a death trap, every vehicle a weapon. Wick scanned the chaos, jaw tight, eyes glinting with cold calculation. "Dom, it's not about survival anymore," he said, his voice cutting through the distant explosion. "It's about ending it before it ends everything." Dom's gaze swept the horizon, smouldering buildings and overturned cars, fleeing civilians caught between armies of assassins and mercenaries. His fists clenched, knuckles white. The streets were alive with violence, and yet the thought hit him with staggering clarity. No strategy, no alliance, no amount of firepower could win this war. It was too vast, too intricate, too merciless. All they could do was survive, strike decisively, and force a conclusion. The realization was heavy, but it sharpened his resolve. He turned to Wick, eyes burning with determination. "Then we end it. Tonight, no hesitation, no holding back." A distant explosion shook the street, sending a plume of fire into the night sky. Above the chaos, a helicopter descended, its spotlight sweeping the ruins like a predatory eye. And in that moment, Dom understood with stark certainty. The war couldn't be won. It could only be ended. The sky bled red over the port, a prelude to the chaos about to unfold. Shipping containers stretched into the distance like silent tombstones, their corrugated walls casting long, jagged shadows in the fading light. Dom's charger growled beneath him, tires crunching gravel as he cut a path through the skeletal maze of cranes and steel. Wick sat in the passenger seat, expression unreadable, eyes scanning the perimeter with a predator's focus. Not a word had passed between them in minutes. Silence had become their weapon, each heartbeat synchronized to the hum of distant engines and the faint drip of rain on rusted metal. "Once we go in," Dom finally said, his voice low and steady, "there's no coming back." Wick didn't answer immediately. He adjusted the strap of his sidearm, the faintest crease forming between his brow. "There's never been coming back," he replied, the cold weight of truth hanging in the air. His gaze flicked to the shadows beyond the dockyard, to the labyrinth of men and machines waiting to kill them. This wasn't just an operation. It was a reckoning. The first strike was almost silent. Wick slipped from the charger before it stopped, landing on the gravel like a shadow detached from the world. His pistols gleamed under the dim floodlights as he moved with lethal precision, dispatching the first wave of guards before they could react. Dom followed in the charger, engines roaring as he plowed through a blockade of SUVs, shoving vehicles aside with calculated fury. Sparks flew as metal collided, the acrid scent of burning tires and gunpowder cutting through the night air. Inside the labyrinth of containers, every corner was a trap, every shadow a threat. Letty and Roman flanked Dom at key choke points, their faces tight with concentration. Bullets ricocheted off steel, striking containers with deafening clangs, sending clouds of rust and dust into the air. Explosions punctuated the chaos. Wick had planted charges along the perimeter, each detonated with cold timing that left enemies scattered and bleeding. They moved with grim efficiency, every kill exacting a toll. Dom's eyes flicked to Wick repeatedly, noting the precision in every movement, the assassin's economy of violence. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only a clear path through death. Dom's hand tightened on his steering wheel as he realized how much of himself he'd lost to this world of endless blood and borrowed loyalty. Hours or maybe minutes passed. Time became a fractured, meaningless thing, measured only by the pulse of gunfire and the flash of muzzle light. Dom and Wick reached the inner sanctum, a fortress of reinforced steel and security systems designed to keep the high table's secrets hidden. Cameras blinked, automated defenses clicked into place, and guards moved with choreographed efficiency. Dom's voice cut through the tension. "We go in together. No one survives alone." Wick nodded once and they breached. Steel doors screamed against hydraulics as they forced entry, moving through corridors thick with the metallic scent of fear and blood. Wick's movements were poetry, each kill precise. Dom's driving and combat skill complemented him like two halves of the same weapon. Explosions rocked the building, showers of sparks lighting their path like fireflies in a storm. They reached the heart of the operation, the command hub, where the high table's unseen leaders orchestrated chaos across continents. Screens flickered with financial transactions, death lists, and blueprints of assassinations in progress. Dom's chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. Wick's face, normally unreadable, showed the faintest flicker of something that resembled awe or perhaps contempt. Then the alarms went silent. For the first time in hours, the world seemed to pause. Dom turned, expecting Wick, but the seat was empty. Panic flickered across Dom's face for only a moment before his instincts kicked in. He scanned the room, every exit, every corner, but Wick had vanished. The only sign he'd ever been there was the precise devastation he'd left in his wake. Bodies neatly incapacitated, systems disabled, and the unmistakable order of chaos he always carried. Dom's radio crackled with distant, distorted voices, high table remnants scrambling, confused, enraged, but Wick's absence left a void. The assassin had disappeared into the network of shadows only he could navigate, leaving Dom to face the aftermath alone. Outside, the sky darkened further, clouds swirling as if the city itself mourned. Dom leaned against a container, chest heaving, the taste of salt and blood heavy in his mouth. He realized then the truth. Every action tonight had been irreversible. Allies were lost, enemies crushed, and the world they knew, already fragile, was now irrevocably altered. He touched his chest where the adrenaline still thumped, eyes narrowing on the distant horizon. "If he's alive," he muttered, almost to himself, "he's somewhere out there, waiting." And somewhere beyond the chaos and the smoke, Wick moved unseen, a ghost among shadows. The final strike executed, the last kill unclaimed. The war was over, but the story, like Wick himself, was nowhere to be found. The sun barely pierced the ash-grey sky, casting fractured light across a city that had once been alive with speed and life. Concrete and steel were torn, streets pockmarked with craters and smoking wrecks. The roar of engines had been replaced by an eerie silence, punctuated only by the distant groan of twisted metal settling into ruin. Dom stepped out of his battered charger, boots crunching against shards of glass and gravel. Every breath felt heavy, like inhaling the consequences of battles too vast to measure. Letty was crouched near the remnants of a collapsed overpass, cleaning a blade with meticulous care. Her face, streaked with soot and dried blood, betrayed both relief and grief. She looked up at Dom as he approached, eyes narrowing. "It's over, isn't it?" she asked, her voice brittle, haunted by the memory of who hadn't survived. Dom didn't answer immediately. He scanned the horizon where smoke rose in slow, curling tendrils. The city had changed. Their enemies, the high table, had crumbled under the assault. Their power fractured like shattered glass. But victory had a price. Friends, allies, innocents. The toll weighed heavier than any bounty, any mission. Tej and Ramsey emerged from the shadows of a destroyed tunnel, moving slowly, testing their limbs, alive but scarred. Roman limped beside them, pale but furious, muttering curses under his breath at ghosts no one could see. Dom's gaze fell to the water, the docks still littered with burned-out vehicles and broken crates. Memories of the war were everywhere. The night they fought in neon-lit streets, Wick moving like death incarnate beside them. The high-speed chases, the firefights that had shredded entire blocks. He clenched his jaw, trying to force the memory away. They had won. The high table had fallen. And yet, the emptiness around them was proof that some losses could never be repaired. Letty approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her eyes searched his, looking for the same reassurance she used to give, the silent promise that family survived. But Dom shook his head slowly. "We're not invisible anymore," he said quietly, voice carrying over the wind and distant crumbling concrete. "Everyone knows who we are and what we're capable of. Nothing can hide us now." A faint whistle of wind carried over the harbour. Dom's instincts flared. He turned sharply, hand on the hood of his car, scanning, every muscle coiled, expecting a movement. But there was only the stillness of aftermath. The streets were empty of enemies. Every trace of the high table's operatives had vanished. The hunters were gone, but their shadow lingered. He thought of Wick, the man who had moved through the battlefield like a ghost, a force that had rewritten the rules of every fight they had faced. Dom's chest tightened. In the chaos of the final strike, Wick had disappeared. He had been everywhere and nowhere, leaving death and justice in equal measure. No one had seen him leave. No one had seen him fall. And yet the mark of his existence, so precise, so absolute, was imprinted on the world around them. Tage approached Dom, voice subdued. "Where? Where's he?" he asked, glancing toward the skyline, toward shadows that held no answers. Dom shook his head, uncertainty gnawing at him. He wanted certainty, wanted to know that the man who had carried them through the war was alive. But he felt the cold truth pressing in. Some victories demanded ambiguity, some sacrifices were permanent. Letty knelt by a smashed crate, uncovering a child's toy and half melted by fire. She held it for a moment, then tucked it into her jacket. "We survived," she said, though her voice wavered. "But not everyone did. Not without scars." Dom exhaled slowly, shoulders sagging under the weight of responsibility. His family, smaller now, stood around him, each member carrying a story of survival, of pain, of choices made under impossible circumstances. They had rebuilt their lives once before. Now, they would rebuild in a world that would always remember the war they had waged. He looked toward the horizon again, grey water stretching into fog. The wind carried with it a memory of Wick's presence, the precision, the inevitability, the silence after the storm. No one knew what had become of him. Alive, dead, somewhere between. The uncertainty gnawed at Dom, but he understood instinctively. Legends did not linger. They left echoes. The city, battered and broken, began to stir as a lone engine rumbled far in the distance, a reminder that life and danger were relentless. Dom's eyes narrowed. He turned to Letty, Tage, Ramsay, and Roman, faces hardened yet resolute. "We've won," he said, "but nothing will ever be the same. And we survive. Because we have to." He looked back toward the docks, toward where Wick had last been seen. A single faint ripple on the water glinted in the dying light, almost like a signal or a warning. Dom's jaw tightened. Somewhere, somehow, John Wick was out there, and the world though momentarily quiet, was waiting for him. Dom's hand clenched into a fist. He turned to lead his family away from the ruin, every step a promise of endurance. Behind him, the city breathed war and ash, memories of bullets and engines lingering in every street. The cost of victory was clear, permanent, and yet they moved forward, scarred, vigilant, unbroken. But the question remained, unspoken, yet unrelenting. Where is Wick? And when he returned, what will it cost next? The city slept under a fragile calm, but Dom knew better. The streets were quiet, too quiet, like a held breath before a storm. Rain-slicked alleyways reflected the neon glow of distant signs. The orange and purple fractured in puddles that trembled with every passing car. Dom stood outside his garage, hood pulled over his head, listening. Somewhere in the distance, the faint rumble of a powerful engine cut through the night. It wasn't a sound that belonged to his world. Or maybe it was, but changed. Sharper, more deliberate. Letty emerged from the shadows, her coat dripping, hair plastered to her face. She placed a hand on Dom's arm, eyes scanning the streets instinctively. "You feel it too," she said quietly, almost a whisper. "Something's moving, something deliberate." Dom's gaze narrowed. "I do," he murmured. His mind replayed the past months, the war that had shattered the high table, the battles the friends lost, the scars they'd carried home. For a while he'd allowed himself the illusion that it was over, that they had survived. But instinct, honed by years of war on streets and alleys and boardrooms alike, told him otherwise. A shadow moved at the edge of a distant rooftop. Dom's hand twitched near his side, but he didn't draw a weapon. The figure was small, deliberate in movement, a single presence threading through the night like a needle through cloth. The rumors that had been whispered through the underground networks now felt tangible, a lone operative dismantling what remained of the high table's influence. Precision strikes vanishing without a trace. No witnesses, no mercy. Teju's voice crackled over the phone from somewhere in the city. "Dom, you're not going to believe this. Multiple sightings, assaults, cleanup operations. Whoever it is, they're ghosting the world." Dom hung up without replying, jaw tight, and he already knew. Minutes later, Dom entered his garage. The place smelled faintly of oil and wet asphalt, familiar yet foreign after months of warfare. Engines hummed idly, cars lined up like silent sentinels. He ran a hand over the hood of his Charger, every groove and scratch a memory of survival. Letty followed, keeping close, her eyes wary, scanning the shadows. Something caught Dom's eye on the workbench. A coin, worn and heavy, glinted under the harsh fluorescent light. He knelt slowly, heart tightening. The coin. The same one he had seen months ago, the coin that had meant life, death, and everything in between. The coin that only John Wick could leave. Dom picked it up, fingers brushing the cold metal. A shiver ran down his spine, not of fear, but recognition. Someone had been here. Someone who didn't announce themselves. Someone who moved like the night itself. Dom's jaw tightened. "He's back," he said, voice low and almost a growl. "And he's letting us know. He hasn't forgotten. Nothing." Outside, a single car engine roared in the distance. It wasn't racing, wasn't fleeing, it was moving with purpose, measured, unyielding. Dom's eyes narrowed as he watched the street, each shadow suddenly alive with possibility. Letty stepped closer, hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "You know who it is," she said softly, the unspoken weight of it hanging between them. Dom turned the coin over in his hand, eyes scanning the garage one last time. Every scar on the walls, every dented vehicle, every remnant of their war, it all felt like preparation. For what? For this moment, he realized, for the reckoning that never truly ended. Wick wasn't a hero, he wasn't a savior, he was a force, and forces don't simply vanish. They leave traces, echoes, threats, warnings. The sound of footsteps approached, deliberate and slow, yet Dom didn't move. He didn't need to. He already knew the pattern, the presence, the inevitable truth. Wherever Wick went, the world changed. And wherever he wasn't, someone would pay. Letty's hand gripped his arm. "Dom, we survived the war," she whispered, "but maybe this is the peace before the next storm." Dom's eyes hardened. The coin clenched in his fist. He felt the pull, the same relentless force that had driven him through every battle, every chase, every fight for family. He understood that whatever John Wick was doing now, dismantling the remnants of the high table, moving unseen, untouchable, it wasn't over. It could never be over. A low hum of an engine grew closer. Dom walked to the garage door, slowly lifting it, eyes fixed on the street beyond. Neon reflections danced across puddles, but no one was there. The city seemed empty, yet Dom felt it. A presence, precise, unavoidable, patient. He turned the coin over one last time. The message was clear. John Wick was still out there, watching, judging, acting, and sooner or later their paths would cross again. Dom pocketed the coin, voice steady, resolute. "Then we wait," he said, "because when he comes, the world will remember why ghosts don't stay buried." Outside, the rain began to fall heavier, drumming a relentless cadence against the rooftops and asphalt. The city slept, but the war, quiet, unseen, unstoppable, was far from over. And somewhere in the darkness, a figure moved with lethal certainty, leaving only echoes and questions in his wake. The city skyline burned gold under a late afternoon sun. Its reflection fractured across puddles in the empty streets. Smoke curled lazily from distant fires, remnants of battles that had carved scars into every corner of this world. Concrete was cracked, cars abandoned like statues, tires shredded in sharp, black streaks across the asphalt. Even the air seemed tense, heavy with the memory of gunfire and the scent of gasoline. Dom stood at the edge of a rooftop, arms crossed, eyes scanning the horizon. His crew, smaller now, huddled behind him, battered but alive. The soft hum of engines echoed in the distance, not the street-racing roar of yesterday, but the quiet, steady rhythm of survival. He breathed in, and the wind tugged at his shirt, as if to remind him that the world they'd fought for was fragile. Fragile, but theirs. A shadow detached itself from the ruins below. John Wick moved like a ghost across the debris-strewn streets. Every step measured, silent except for the faint scrape of his boots over broken concrete. His coat flared around his knees like black smoke in motion. The scars on his hands were raw, reminders of the battles no one would fully understand. He stopped 10 meters away, eyes fixed on Dom, and in that moment the chaos of their past, the bullets, the engines, the fire, the betrayals, fell away into a tense silence. Dom's gaze softened, but his jaw remained tight. "You're still here," he said, not a question, but a statement of fact. Wick's eyes flicked toward him, unreadable as always. "I never left. Not really." For a heartbeat, they just watched each other. Two legends in a world that had almost destroyed them both, each carrying scars that no one else could see. The wind shifted, carrying the distant sound of sirens and the faint hiss of cooling metal, and it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Dom stepped forward, the soles of his boots scraping against the cracked concrete. "We won, John. The high table is gone. Your war is over. Our war is over." Wick's lips pressed into a thin line. He shook his head slowly. Nothing's over. Wars like ours, they never end. You just find a place to fight the next one. The words hung between them, heavier than any bullet ever fired. For the first time in years, Dom saw the toll of unending battles etched into Wick's face. The exhaustion, the quiet fury, the unwilling acceptance of solitude. It was a mirror of his own life, though his battles had always been for family, for a home. Wick fought for the shadows, Dom fought for the light, and somehow they had met in the middle. Dom motioned toward the ruined streets below. We go our own ways now. I keep my family safe. You keep the darkness from spreading. Is that the deal? Wick's hand brushed the edge of his coat, fingers grazing the grip of a weapon he would never fully put away. His eyes softened, just enough. It's not a deal. It's a path. One we can't walk together forever. But it's enough. A distant rumble broke the fragile quiet. A car engine far off echoed against the steel skeletons of broken buildings. Wick didn't flinch. Dom's hand rested briefly on his own keys, the symbol of the life he chose to protect. Both men knew that legends don't retire. They only change arenas, one in light, the other in shadow. Wick turned, his coat flaring as he walked backward toward the alleyways that led into the darkened city. Dom watched him go, each step measured, purposeful. A soft sigh escaped him, unspoken grief for battles they'd fought together, losses they could never reclaim, and victories that felt hollow without a shared celebration. The wind shifted again, stirring the ash and debris at their feet. Dom's gaze lingered on Wick until the figure disappeared completely, swallowed by the labyrinth of streets below. And for the first time in years, the world seemed quieter, almost still. But stillness was deceptive. Somewhere in the distance, in a world of shadows and whispers, Wick would always be moving, and Dom would always be watching, guarding what mattered. Separate paths, yet intertwined by history, by battle, by respect forged in fire. Dom finally turned back to his crew, placing a hand on each shoulder as they followed him toward a battered but intact car. The engine roared to life, the sound reverberating against broken concrete. We move forward. Together, he said. And even as the sun dipped behind the horizon, there was a warmth in the grit and ruin, a reminder that survival was more than blood and speed. Wick's silhouette lingered in memory, a dark myth walking among ghosts. And though unseen, his presence was a promise. Darkness would never rise unchecked. Light would never be abandoned. Legends do not fade. They become the shadows that haunt the world long after the war has ended. The camera would linger on the empty streets, the echoes of engines and footsteps fading into the twilight, and somewhere, just out of sight, a single coin glinted, a silent reminder that one man's war never truly ends, even if the other walks into the light.